Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Samus, the founder and CEO of Solveres. Solveres means solutions in Latin, and that's what we're about. And after we have the blessing of the speaker that we have tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the solutions and just touch briefly on the opportunity, because most of the time on Thursday night goes to our, I would even call him our spiritual leader, or definitely our mental leader, but he's authored at least four books, several publications. His TED Talk is on our website. He tells it, he weaves his personal stories right from the heart into a knowledge. We're in for a real treat. So with that, I would like to introduce Dusty Staub.
Thanks, Mark. You know, this is actually part 3. So if you're just coming in, you missed part 1 and part 2. So I'll just do a quick recap for everybody. Part 1 is, and this is based on the book I wrote with a colleague of mine and a friend, been a friend for 50 years, Wayne Gerber. And it's called Dynamic Focus, Creating Significance and Breaking the Spells of Limitation. And what it is based on is, as from a psychological point of view and from a scientist's point of view, that's my friend Wayne. We were looking at why is change so difficult? Why do people struggle with change? And why, being the richest nation in the world, do we have a multi-billion-dollar depression industry, a multi-billion-dollar anti-anxiety medication? We have some of the unhealthiest, most unhappy people in the world here in this country. And a lot of it has to do with the way we think. So we were looking at something and we called it cognitive traps. In cognitive psychology, we'll talk about ways of thinking and perceiving that limit our capacity to see and respond to the world in a more productive way. We call those spells. And a spell is any way of thinking that limits me, that causes unhappiness or a lack of joy in my life. So spell-based behavior is what we talked about in the first session. So spell-based behavior can be somebody who consistently, I had one man I worked with, executive, who'd been married 10 times. Now that's spell-based, right? He's an eternal optimist because he kept thinking, but he was looking for the right one as opposed to looking at himself and saying, what do I need to change in me? So spell-based behavior can be anything that limits our capacity to experience greater joy or be more successful. It has to do with negative belief systems we have, or embedded scripts people live. I talked about that in Claude Steiner. That was number 1. Session number 2, we were talking about the master spell. And the master spell in our society is overdoing. And we talked about the 3 levels of being. The lowest level of being is human having. I'm okay because of what I have. A human doing, I'm okay because what I do. And the highest level is human being. I'm okay because I am. And if I be really at peace with myself and I be good with myself, I can do whatever I do, get better at it. I can have whatever I have. And if what I have is taken away, I'm still okay. What I do is taken away, I'm still okay. So the most powerful place to come from is that human beingness. Then you can do what you do better and you can have what you have and enjoy it. I have the privilege of working with some very rich and very well-off people worth multiple billions of dollars. And I guess the lowest executive I work with is only worth $10 million. And these executives, most of them have made all kinds of money. They have private jets, they have chauffeurs, they have 2 or 3 or 4 homes. They're on their 2nd or 3rd or 4th marriage. And they're not happy. Oh, they got all the toys, they're very satisfied, but they're not happy. And so what I work with them on is, how do you become a human being versus a human doing, because they're great at doing, or a human having? Because everything's at risk. If it's based on what I have, it's based on what I do, that can be taken away. But when do I get taken away is really kind of the question. So that was really part 2. Part 3, which is today, builds on all of that and comes right out of our book. And it is, the question is, what doesn't change and change? When you look at change and all the things going on, what doesn't change and change? That's a question. Anybody? What doesn't change and change?
Oh, goodness. Put us on the spot there, Dusty.
How it's spelled?
Okay, I'm going to pipe in, but it's time. It's basically the understanding of time, and understanding.
Okay, understanding. And with all that getting, get the understanding, right? So what doesn't change and change is knowing who you really are, what really matters, the beingness. And so we call it purpose. So the first work I do when I'm coaching anybody, the first work we do in our company when we go into an organization is, what is the fundamental purpose of this business? The answer I most often get is making money. I say, okay, you're in trouble. Making money is how you keep score, and you have to do that to stay in business. But if you think that's your purpose, every business that only chases the almighty dollar ends up suboptimizing, being acquired by others for pennies on the dollar, or goes out of business. What's the fundamental social need you meet, right? Think about the soul of Solveres. What is the fundamental need that it meets in society? And if you focus on that purpose and you don't lose sight of it and you hold to your values, that doesn't change. Everything else can change. You can acquire new businesses, you can move in different ways, you can change your operating systems, you can change how you go about doing what you're doing. That change is going to happen. However, what doesn't change is your core orientation, knowing who you are, what matters most, and what you hold to no matter what else comes at you. I'm great at dealing with all kinds of changes and being caught by surprise. I was meeting with the president and his team on Sunday night, doing a dinner working session before we did the team session. And halfway through the dinner, he starts yelling at his team. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting a nice, quiet dinner to get them prepped for a really good mood on Monday. So I had to deal with that. But I knew who I was. And I said, okay, there's an opportunity. So I started reframing things. And within 30 minutes, we were back on track. And I got to talk to the president about it. And the next day, we had a great session, got a lot done. But it stays knowing who you are. You can deal with whatever hits you, whatever comes at you, because you've got the ballast. It's like a ship facing into a big wave. You don't want to be sideways to it. You want to have enough ballast that you're not going to let the waves turn you over. And you want to be bow on into those waves of change. So purpose doesn't change. So the fundamental thing for me is your guiding purpose and your 4 core values. When we work with people, we say, if you know that, now you're going to be able to deal with all of the shifts in the way you think, the way you work, and the way your customers are changing, because the world is going to change even more. As much change as you've seen in the past 2 years, hold on to your hats. It's nothing compared to what's coming in the next 18 months. And what's coming after that is even bigger. There's tsunamis of change coming. And so you need a solution-based place. You need a place where you know who you are. You know you've got a family, you've got a group of people who have your backs and support you, and you know that you're all aligned in that guiding purpose and those values. That allows you then to deal with all of the waves of change. So that's the first step. There's 5. The first step is knowing that purpose and those values. When I ask a lot of executives who make lots of money why they're on this earth, they can't tell me. It's like a deer in headlight. Why are you on this earth? I asked one executive who has 9 companies. He's created 9 companies. He said, and he talked for 20 minutes. I said, you don't know why you're here, do you? He said, well, I sort of do. I said, if I ask you about this business, what's it about? He could tell me. What about this? But he could tell me. What are you about? He couldn't tell me. So we did some work over 6 months, and he defined his purpose and his guiding values. And it led him to his second wife. And he asked me to officiate at that wedding, which was really a gift. And so I officiated at the wedding, and he said to his family members, he said, until I did this work, I didn't know who I really was, and I didn't know how to be joyful. I know how to make money. I know how to create businesses. I didn't know how to really enjoy my life, and I would not be with this woman, and she wouldn't be choosing to marry me if I hadn't done this work. So knowing that core orientation, here's a question for you. Can you state in one short sentence why you're on this earth? Can you state your guiding 4 values? It'd be nice if you could do that next time we meet, next Thursday, if you know what those are, and send those in. And a way to look at it is think about the 5 times in your life you felt most alive. 5 times you felt most alive. What were the memories? Then look at the theme that connects 3 or more of those memories. For me, it was when I looked at creating my purpose, which I created when I was 32, after I had my experience that I shared in the TED Talk, I was thinking it was every time I found the courage to stand up to a bully who was bullying my little sister, a bully for my little brother. When I stood up to my father, he knocked me up against the wall. I mean, I got hurt sometimes, but I always felt stronger and better inside because I'd found the courage to do what I knew was right, rather than just stand by and watch it happen. And so that was the key. It's finding my heart. It's coming from my heart was the key. What are those 5 memories? Think about who most inspires you. Who are 1 or 2 of the figures you know in life or that you've read about that most inspires you? And what are the qualities about them that inspire you? Because that's a clue to who you really are at heart. You look at those 5 memories and the themes, you look at who most inspires you, write it out, and then say, all right, if I had to state in 1 short sentence why I'm on this earth, what would I want to say based on all this? And the test of it is this. If Alan is at his own funeral, and Alan, don't do this right now, this is just imagination only. Alan's at his own funeral and he's sitting there in spirit, nobody can see him. And one person closest to him, it might be one of his children, who's now 70 years old, is getting up and said, Dad was all about X. And he can only say 1 short sentence. What would Alan most want to hear him say? Well, my purpose statement is I want to come from my deepest heart and invite everyone I meet to come from theirs so that together we can be our authentic, best version of ourselves. If at my funeral, one of my 3 children is delivering my eulogy and they say, Dad was always working to come from his heart and inviting others to come from theirs and always striving to help himself and others be their best version of themselves, that would do it. And even they said, oh, Dad was always striving to come from his heart, invite others to come from theirs, that would do it. That's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do. It's why the coaching I do and I get paid really well for the work I do. And I love it. They don't understand. I would still do it. It's like, I don't get paid to share this with you guys. It's just part of my passion and hoping that it's helpful to some of you and that you take it and really run with it. So that's my purpose. And my guiding 4 values that really help me with that is first, authenticity. The version you get is the version everybody gets. I'm not any different. I don't put on any mask. There's no pretense. I show up and talk to multi-billionaire like I would talk to somebody on the corner who's asking for a handout. It's the same, authenticity. I don't have to worry about what I put on. I'm who I am. The second for me is courage, because where your courage stops is where your leadership stops. Where your courage stops is where your effectiveness stops. And where your courage stops is where you stop. So courage. I always have to be willing to face into those fears, and there's always new fears and new things to work through. The third value for me is compassion, because everybody you meet, as the Buddha said, has suffered and will suffer. And so compassion, and of course, Christ on the cross saying, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. So those are 2 models for me of, can I be that compassionate when people do me wrong? Show compassion rather than judgment. And the 4th value is grace, because I'm not always coming from my deepest heart. I'm not always inviting. Sometimes I can be a little testy. My wife could attest to that. I'm not always as kind as I want to be. I'm not always inviting people to come from their heart. I always get to correct, remember, and say, wait a minute, this is not who I am. It's not who I wish to be. So I get to go back on the horse, back on purpose, back on my values, and correct. So grace. We're going to make lots of mistakes in our life we get to correct. So if you know your purpose and you know those 4 values, you're going to be ready to deal with anything that comes at you because you're coming from a human beingness, which enables you then to do what you do with greater power. And it allows you to have what you have and enjoy it without becoming so attached to it. Because remember, I shared this in my TEDx talk, there comes a point where you're going to have to let go of everything. You're going to have to let go of this body. The price of life is death. So what do we have while we have it? Do we enjoy it? Can we let it go? And can we really know that we've really done our soul's work and been at that soul level? So the foundation of dealing with change, and we teach this to businesses and corporations and teams and so forth, is first of all, who are you? What do you stand for? And what are your core values? Now, how are you sharing that every day and living it every day in what you do. Now, the other 4 steps will be how you deal with all the change once you know you've got that rudder, you've got that ballast. In a way, it's like a gyroscope. You keep it spinning by thinking about it every day, and you get knocked off plumb, you come back to center. You get knocked off course, you come back to course. You want to keep that gyroscope spinning by thinking about the purpose every day, thinking of the values. So that's the foundational piece, and that's the key first step in what we call the dynamic development cycle. So next week, we'll talk about perception and expanding perception. And we'll talk about critical human system factors the next week, et cetera. So those are the building blocks once you have the foundation of purpose and values. So that's the shortest way I can